can see this in 17 verse 1. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am El Shaddai. Walk before me and be blameless. Where have we heard those words before? Genesis 6:9. Walk before me and be blameless. Tamim, same word. Not necessarily blameless, but be made whole, be made complete. If you set your feet on the right path, if you walk in the right direction, on the right road, you will be considered whole. You will be made complete. And as a result, you will have right relations with me. You will be able to dwell with me in a right fashion, rightly related to the living God. When Avram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am El Shaddai, walk before me and be made whole. As you read further, this walking out would now include the act of circumcision. Like I said, everything is building upon these words. The covenant's building on each other. The road, with every edict, with every premise that was given to the children of Israel, another stone is laid on the path of righteousness, on how we would relate properly to the Lord. Now there's just too much really to talk about this in great detail, unfortunately. So really what I want to do is attempt to highlight this pattern of action prompting belief. Not cerebral, but one that prompts action. This action prompting belief whose natural byproduct is righteousness. So we see here that Abraham is instructed to walk the same path really that Noah walked. Added a few things, of course. This path is being built upon and more clearly defined, and it is through this walk that the fullness of righteousness would eventually be revealed. Now, don't misunderstand me, because when I link walking with righteousness, I'm only doing so as it's described in the Scriptures, not really to state that somehow you can earn God's righteousness by walking. Really, these things are so deeply synonymous with one another that they're really all part of the same concept. It is true that some people have thought that somehow by doing a certain thing, you can earn God's grace. You can earn this or you can earn that. There is an element of this that's true, but of course, when taken to the perverted degree, which a lot of people take it, it can become this whole concept of legalism, where if you don't do this, you failed miserably, and now you have been ostracized from this. Not at all, really. All of these things are so beautifully, intricately aligned with each other that it's really difficult to separate righteousness, walking, and being blameless, being made whole. So I'm not trying to say that you can earn God's merit of righteousness. And really the question needs to be asked, do we really earn anything on our own anyways? Is not the calling, everything that we have seen laid down in the Torah, and even what we've been discussing here, none of this would have happened if it wasn't for God saying, yes, you are worthy of death, but I'm not going to kill you right now. I want to lead you to life. There is a road that you created because of your choices that leads to death. But I don't want that to be the road that you travel. I want you to walk on the steps to life, the path to life. So everything is a gift. We haven't earned anything, and we cannot earn anything on our own. And as we've seen, really, the rewards that come as a result of walking, of being rightly related to the Lord, are truly a gift as well. Any confusion on this subject can be linked to looking at the entire process through the eyes of people, through the eyes of man. But when you read the Scripture, it all opens up like a beautiful flower. You don't see those inconsistencies. You see everything working together, very much like the inner workings of a watch. Every piece must work for the whole project, the whole program to work succinctly. So it's crucial that we look at all these concepts through the eyes of our Creator. As a result, what we begin to see is that all of these elements existed before the foundation of the earth was laid. Before the world was created, was tzedakah there? Was righteousness there? Or was this a concept that God created as the result of man's fall? We see in the scriptures that the way of walking, that the whole idea of righteousness, the way of walking, the way we relate to the Lord, all existed before the foundations of the earth were laid. Psalm 48:10 speaks really of this eternal nature. David declares, "As is your name, God, so is your praise to the ends of the ends of the earth. Your right hand is full of righteousness." Now, when you read the scriptures, you can see that many things emanate from the right hand of God. His wisdom. I think a couple years ago we studied about how Yeshua was the tent of wisdom of God's right hand, and how this tent dwelt amongst men. Wisdom comes from the right hand of God. Justice, honor, strength, salvation, really the Messiah himself, who all these concepts are attached to. One of them being right relations with the Lord. The way to righteousness existed before man erred and sinned and created his own way of death. So it was already there from the very beginning, which is obvious that God knew what would happen, and he already had the tools and the resources at hand to save us from our own perversions, from our own downfall, our own death. Right hand existed before everything. In fact, we read that the world was created through the agency of his right hand. All things were created. The further preeminence of being rightly related to God can be seen in two specific places in the book of Isaiah. Let's look at a couple of them if we have time, and then I think I'm going to stop after that. Isaiah 33:15. Again, I'm kind of building on this idea of righteousness existed from the very beginning. That if it's not for the gift of righteousness, we could not have our feet placed on that path to begin that walk in the first place. So we really don't earn anything. Isaiah 33:15, in the context of God describing who can survive the coming judgment, who can survive the wrath, he states, "He who walks righteously." And he who speaks blamelessly, he who despises the gain of oppressions, who shakes his hands from the taking of a bribe, who stops his ears from the hearing of blood and shuts his eyes from looking on evil. Now, all these are different concepts. And what you have to understand, what's very, very important to understand, that oftentimes in the scriptures, the order in which things are delineated has to do with their importance. So the first thing that you read about of one who is going to survive the path that leads to death, who in fact will survive the coming judgment, the first thing is that individual needs to walk righteously. Now, if you don't walk righteously, everything that follows doesn't matter. Everything that follows doesn't necessarily count, because you're doing it under your own volition, under your own strength. Is it not true that many in the world keep their eyes from looking on evil, that wipe their hands of the taking of a bribe, that don't have blood on their hands, so to speak, that despise the gain of the oppressor? Isn't it true oftentimes that the people of the world will follow after these things? So it's nothing new that in order for those things to be acceptable before the Lord, you first have to walk righteously. Preeminent, at the top. First and foremost, if you don't have proper relation to the Lord, if you're not walking on the path of right relation, it doesn't matter if you speak blamelessly. It doesn't matter if you wring your hands of blood and you keep your eyes from looking upon evil. because you're doing it under your own volition, your own strength. You are not in right relation with the Lord. You first have to walk righteously. The world says, sure, I'll be accepted, since after all, I'm a good person. We've all heard that. I do this and I do that. Sure, I'll be accepted. They have their merit in this world, but not in the world to come. Because this whole section of Scripture has to do with the coming judgment of the Lord. And the world to come, the road that leads back into the garden, because of course we know we all move in a circular fashion. And so we are all traveling on that road that is eventually going to lead us back into the garden, that road of life. The road that leads there requires one to be rightly related with God. Who has his or her feet set in the proper fashion. I want to look at one more. Having to do with Messiah, which is something that I want to build upon next week. I want to talk a little bit more about the Torah and its place when it comes to righteousness and walking out. But I also want to talk about what Yeshua spoke on the topic and how very much Yeshua's described in a very illustrative fashion. I want to just touch on that really quick. In Isaiah chapter 11, we see that Yeshayahu, Isaiah, is called upon by the Spirit to give a very beautiful picture of the root that will come from the tribe, from Yeshai, from Jesse. And it says in Isaiah 11, verse 5, very messianic portion of Scripture, that also righteousness will be the belt about his loins. Now, why I'm highlighting this is, again, I'm building on this whole idea that righteousness must come first. Everything has to do with relating properly with the Lord. Now, this whole idea of the belt, the Hebrew word hizo, really was the waistcloth, and you can be distorted in your mind as to what that is, because we know of a belt in a certain way, something you hold your hands up with, so to speak. But really, this hizor was the innermost garment of a man. The first thing that he would place upon his body, whether waking up or bathing, would be this belt. It wasn't an outer garment. It was an inner garment. It was the first thing that he wore. It was essentially, if you want to call it, his underwear, so to speak. So this whole idea of, if you remember Eliyahu, Elijah, when he girded up his loins and he ran. You remember that when Ahab and Jezebel were after him? This whole idea of gathering up this belt to make you more mobile is really cinching up your undergarment. And I don't need to get into anatomy for you to understand why, obviously, that's necessary. A guy needs to be cinched up. That's all there is to it. And this is really the premise of this. Really, I don't mean to draw it in that way, but that's really, to gird up your loins meant to cinch up your underwear, essentially, to make you ready to be mobile. And this was the first thing that this man would put on. Now, why is that so important? Because it's described here. Isaiah describes Messiah very vividly in an illustrative fashion, that the first thing Messiah puts on, if we were to bring him down into the world of clothing in a physical form, the first thing he puts on is righteousness. Righteousness existed before the creation of the world. Before anything happened, righteousness was there. Right relations were there. The first thing Messiah places on his body is righteousness. I find that very fascinating, actually. And all of it has to do with what must take place first to make it acceptable. We cannot be made acceptable before the Lord, regardless of what we do